beautiful souls. Welcome to the Resilience Resourcing Podcast. This is a connection space where badass women share their real on their way to resilience. Each week, I have the pleasure of spotlighting women dominating in a diverse landscape of fields ranging from performance neurotraining to film and all in between. You will get to know the unique qualities these women each carry and how connecting with these empowering women's stories bring about camaraderie and in turn empower you towards your unique dreams and goals.
It's so interesting because in recent weeks, there's been a lot going on around where my path is headed. I, at one point 10 years ago, thought it was very clear, and then lots of things happened.
Yeah, life.
As life does, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, the road is ever changing, right? And that's kind of the theme of my life.
Yes.
The search for stability in an unstable world.
Yes.
As far as art and art therapy goes, my grandmother on my mother's side of my family of origin was an artist, as was her father, like
Wow.
professional artist. He was a local Portland commercial artist.
Wow.
And did all the advertisement artwork for like the City of Roses. There's like a festival of roses here every year, and he would do all the artwork for it. I actually have some of his mock-ups. This is from like, the early 20th century.
Wow.
Yeah. And my grandmother kind of followed in his footsteps, and she was quite an artist. I have a lot of her artwork in my home. And anytime I got to hang out with her, I was always, if she was painting, I was sitting right there at her knee.
Yeah.
And as I got older, I was never confident in my art. And I think part of that comes, like, my realization as I got older was because artists are self-deprecating and they're always their worst critics, right?
Yeah.
My grandmother certainly was that. She was an incredible artist, award-winning, renowned in her area. She lived in Huntington Beach and then Joshua Tree for 30, 40 years. And she was always her worst critic. And I think I picked that up so much so that I didn't pursue that.
Yeah.
Even though I wish I had.
Yeah.
So I took other people's criticisms to heart too when doing my art and presenting it to others. And then I laid it down very early. I mean, I've always had artistic expression. I made jewelry. I did these lots of arts and craftsy kinds of things. But as far as like living my life as a true artist, I didn't think that was possible. I had to be more realistic, right?
Yeah.
So realistic to me at the time in my early 20s was getting into the rock and roll scene in Los Angeles. Hollywood. And
I bet you got lots of stories with that one.
I do for sure. Crazy stories. Maybe some of those will come out, but but something happened in my family. A tragic event happened when I was 20 years old, and that changed the course of lots of things.
Wow.
And by the time I was in my mid-20s, I realized that something wasn't right, and I needed help. So a friend recommended me to a counselor, and that changed my life. I got diagnosed with complex Ptsd.
Wow.
And from the events of my childhood, which were never ending.
Wow.
There was trauma, multiple abandonment issues, and abuse, mental, physical abuse. And then all of that culminating in this thing that happened when I was 20 years old. There were a lot of events that led up to the moment of tragedy, but ultimately my younger brother, who's 4.5 years younger than me, murdered my best friend.
Oh my.
And
Wow.
yeah, and I don't really want to go into the details of that,
Yeah,
but
of
it
course.
was tragic, and it affected me in ways that I didn't even understand at the time.
Yeah, they're so young and having already gone through what you'd gone through. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I'm such an advocate for therapy, because people's trauma will follow them, and it affects us just like just like being in a physical accident, trauma, mental trauma affects us, and there's no need to stigmatize it. It's just a real part of how our brains work.
It is. And it also is brain damaging and soul
Yes.
crushing and affects us in physical ways that we're not even aware of, and that actually neuroscience is just catching up with.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting because I, in recent years, discovered that all of my autoimmune conditions probably lead back to my childhood trauma.
Oh
And
yeah, of course.
yeah, and that was mind blowing to me, that things that can happen that aren't necessarily, physical, can also affect our physical being
Oh
in
yeah.
such a deep way, like at a cellular level.
Yeah.
Um,
I've heard there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. I don't know if you've
I
heard of
have
that
it right here.
one. Yeah, it's pretty popular. I haven't even read it yet, but I've heard many things about it. Yeah. Wow.
It's so good. I know. I
That's
just
so
happen
crazy.
to have
You
it right
just
here.
like had the book. Wow.
I
That
also
was not even planned, just so everybody knows. That's pretty insane.
I also have the workbook. And
Wow.
yeah, and I haven't gotten to do the deep dive. I've read the book maybe 3/4 of the way through. I want to finish it and do the workbook, but
Hmm.
it is incredible.
Wow, I'm gonna have to get it now.
Yeah.
Now I've heard so much about it, but I feel like things like that are empowering because it's just the truth. That's why I do this podcast. The truth is, so many people have experienced extreme trauma, and
Yeah.
so many people have found ways of resilience through it. But the
Yes.
vulnerability of the fact that you're going through it, that it's not easy, that it is a lot of work. I mean, these are badass people. Like, you are a badass. The fact that you are taking hold of those things and working on them, things that you didn't have control over, like, a lot of people just ignore that and just, get into bad coping mechanisms and things that we all have in some way or another. And they just decide not to ever work on it. And I think that's why empathy is such a huge thing, because you never, ever know what somebody's life has been like. Like, I just,
Absolutely.
wow.
Yes. And it is in the experience of coming up in contact with people who are not empathic or compassionate
Hmm.
to others, and facing others' unkindness,
Hmm.
that actually motivated me to get into counseling in the first place. Because
Really?
you
Wow.
yeah, because I think that, and I love what you're doing, Holly, because it's bringing awareness, right? And um, there's a lot of people who don't understand their own pain,
Hmm.
let alone anyone else's, right?
And they project it. They cause more pain because they project it versus working on it.
Even in my experience, even professionals who are in the counseling field
Oh yeah.
um, do damage.
Oh yes.
They cause
I
pain
have heard that
by not
time and
really
again.
understanding.
Yep. They're not
Yeah.
doing the work. My therapist actually has said this multiple times. Do not trust a therapist who's not doing the work themselves, who
Yes.
doesn't see a therapist on their own time and
Yes.
does their own work, because it doesn't matter who you are. You have to work through your own stuff. And if you're not, you're going to be projecting that on other people.
Yes. As part of my problem currently with how some counseling is going, because it's insurance has pushed it into the medical model
Oh,
where you have to use things like cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy, things that have a timeline. You have 8 weeks to fix this person's problem, but you're not doing that with that. You're giving them some tools for their toolbox,
Yeah.
but you can't restore a person who has deep emotional wounds
Yeah.
in 8 weeks. I'm sorry, it just can't be done.
No, and I think a lot of science and things are showing that those models aren't as effective.
Yes.
And I think, I don't know, have you heard of the holistic psychologist at all?
I love the holistic
Okay, yeah, I'm
psychologist.
huge on her.
Me
And
too.
that's where things are going in a
Yes.
lot of ways. And as somebody who, I know you have your bachelor's, or you almost finished with your master's, or you're working on it basically.
I'm working on my master's, although that's where some of the big changes I was mentioning before are
Yeah,
coming. I
it's difficult. It's a difficult time for school for sure, because I think a lot of things are changing.
yes. And so my original path, after my divorce, in my 40s, I decided that it was time to follow my dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to be an art therapist. That
Mm-hmm.
was when I reconnected with my art, when I was at a point in my healing journey with my therapy path and all
Mm-hmm.
that, I finally found the confidence to go back to school. I went to Marylhurst University,
Where's
and
that?
it was in Lake Oswego, Oregon. It was a
Okay.
130-year-old institution. It was
Wow.
a Catholic university, had been a private women's Catholic university, and then in the late 60s, early 70s, it opened up to all persons, and then developed into a liberal arts college.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, was still run by the lovely nuns. um, Essentially, they ran the property and had a lot of influence on the school, but it was a secular school. It wasn't a religious school.
Yeah.
But I would go so far as to say it was a place of great spiritual healing.
Wow.
And I had a wonderful experience at that college. The entire staff, and anyone having to do with that school, they were all focused on healing
Mm-hmm.
people, systems, the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was a beautiful experience. And I got an interdisciplinary bachelor's, which means I couldn't make up my mind on what I wanted to study, basically. And so my degree is in psychology, communications, interpersonal neurobiology, and fine art.
That is really cool, though. It's those things I feel like go together in a lot of ways that people might not even think.
Yes. Well, so I got to self-design
Mm-hmm.
um, my program, and I included, because they also had a master's in art therapy program there, I
Oh,
included everything I would need in my prerequisites to take that path.
yeah.
Unfortunately, in 2016, when I graduated, there was a lot of turmoil at the school. There was a lot of things going on, and the evidence was showing that the school was probably going to be closing. And
Oh, okay.
that made me really nervous. So I didn't want to invest myself into this art therapy program when it might be pulled out from under me during the middle of it.
Yeah,
So
for
I
sure.
chose to wait it out and see what happened, because the closest art therapy program on the West Coast was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is a lovely place, and I would
Yeah.
live there in a heartbeat too. But I have a son here, and shared custody with his father who lives here, and that just wasn't going to work for me.
Yeah.
So I waited, and a couple years later, I heard that the program had been adopted to Lewis and Clark College,
Oh.
and the woman who ran the program, Mary Andrus, who ran the program at Marylhurst, had brought it to Lewis and Clark. And when I first heard that, I also heard that there were some changes being made to the program. And it was kind of happening all at the same time. And I was a little nervous about stepping into a program that was in flux.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to some friends who had graduated the program when it was still at Marylhurst, and heard some issues that were happening within the industry. And it just all made me nervous because I'm always seeking security, right?
Yeah, of
It's
course.
like my thing.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel safe for
Mm-hmm.
me.
Yeah.
So I decided that the better choice would be the mental health counseling program, that it would have a wide spectrum of use post-graduation. There's all kinds of jobs you can
Yeah.
get with that. And so I just felt like that was a more secure option. But
Yeah.
in retrospect, I was wrong. And my heart belongs in art therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I got this real awakening to it this last semester when I was taking a career counseling class. And we did all of the official career counseling tests, like the
Mm-hmm.
strong interest inventory and the official Myers-Briggs. I'd taken like the Myers-Briggs, um, like the quickie one you do on
Yeah. Yeah.
online
Yeah.
or something, but
Yeah.
this was the official one. And it every test score, my like 100%, this should be your career path, said artist. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Well, I
I,
think there's always a reason though, because even though you might not have gone down that path right away, I bet you that there's so much that you've gained in the time that you've gone this direction that is only going to assist you in the other.
Absolutely, including experiences like learning and becoming a teacher of soul collage, which is the form
Wow.
of Jungian art therapy that I brought to your resilience fair.
Yes, and I have the picture. Maybe at the end of this podcast I can post it or some way to do it when I share this, because that picture is so like the picture of everybody's artwork explaining what family isn't. Was it what is family to you? What was the question? I forget exactly.
I wish I could.
You might not remember either. I'll look at it, but I
I
think it
think
was
it
something.
was something like, what does family mean to you?
Yeah, and it was like powerful because this was a community event. The whole goal was connecting people, making people feel like they have a family that may not. And that visual, like I still like it just chokes me up because it's so powerful. And I was like, you like brought the whole like point of the retreat together. Like that could not have happened if it were not for what you did. And I may never have been able to tell you that. Like I probably didn't, because I was getting that retreat going and doing that was like so much work, more than I ever thought it would be. But I could
You
not
did
have done
so
it without
great.
you. What?
Oh, thank you. You did such a great job. It was really amazing. I wish that more people had shown up for you, because that really was something that so many, I mean, everybody could have benefited from.
Yeah,
And
I
I hope
realized
that you do something like that again. And I'd be happy to help you with marketing and stuff like that,
that's
because I think it's really vital to bring those things to the community.
no, that's I mean, honestly, it's on the board to try to get one going for 2022, for the summer of 2022.
Nice.
And
Yeah, COVID's kind of put a cap on so many things.
oh, I know. And because the first one was 2019 and then 2020 happened and there was no way that was going to happen in
Right?
2020. And so, I just I really have been thinking about art therapy and what you did and how, because art for me, like my dad has always liked Bob Ross painting. I don't know if you've ever seen any of his, but
We worship Bob Ross around here. My
I
son
love
has
it.
like Bob Ross t-shirts and
That's
stuff.
amazing. And that's been like on my bucket list for him to teach me how to paint like Bob Ross, because I love it. And I recently did it finally with him. And it just brought up so much of this. Like, art is such an expression, it is such a therapy. And the fact that you do that, like, I just feel so blessed that I got to know you and be able to, like, have you as part of the retreat. Like, it was incredible.
I really appreciate you saying that. Your words come at a very sensitive time right now, where I'm doing a lot of self-reflection, and it means a lot to me for you to say that. I saw that post when you and your dad did that, and your art was amazing. You guys did
Thank you.
such a good
Oh,
job. It was so cool, and I'm glad that I love your dad. Like, your dad is the funniest person I think I've ever met in my entire life, but he's also, he's got real heart. And
yeah, he does.
I love that that the two of you had that bonding experience, and I hope you continue to do it.
Thank
Um,
you. I mean, that's what I just want to, like, I would love to hear more of, I know it's just, and you don't have to share as much as you want or don't want, but like, you, I think it's kind of crazy because I didn't know until now that is the switch that you were making. In fact, I knew that you were going towards therapy and counseling, and I knew that you had done some work towards art therapy before. But I think it's pretty incredible that this is happening at a time where you're just making that like recognition that, hey, this is actually where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I know, having done a lot of work myself in therapy and still doing a lot of work myself, it is a lot to trust your gut and to do something that is towards what you feel aligned in,
Yeah.
even if it's not what everybody says is going to be the most successful, or what everybody else is doing, when it's something pretty unique. You are the first person I've ever met that does art therapy. So like, this is a really incredible uh th- thing to learn about. And it's just like, I want to hear more of your journey of just like recognizing that and feeling how did you get to the point where you're like, okay, I need to make this change, like this is where I need to go towards.
Well, so it was always my intention since I started school. And it was fear that got in the way of me actually doing it. Like all these things had pointed to this direction, including, so when I first moved to Oregon 14 years ago, the very first thing I did was join this mother's group to
Mm-hmm.
try to make friends. And my son was 2 years old at the time. I wanted him to make friends. And literally the first week that I moved here, I found this mom's group online. And the very first meeting was like at a pub. It was very casual. It was all moms, no babies. We were drinking wine and having little chats. And one of the women asked if I'd ever heard of soul collage.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't. And she's like, well, we're taking a mom's retreat weekend next week. If you can come, we've rented a big house at the beach and we're going to do soul collage.
Yeah.
Well, that was it for me. Like my first card, this was like, um, it was so powerful. And um, the experience, so it's based in Jungian archetypes and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And what it does, as you know, is that you work with your subconscious and you pull these images, and then you make this small, on a 5x8 card, you make this small collage using anywhere between 2 and maybe 5 images that you cut and put together. And it's all very, um, you don't think about it, you feel it. Like you just go on your intuition. It's
Mm-hmm.
not something that you're really using your prefrontal cortex for.
Yeah.
um, and then when the card is finished, you read from the card, I am the one who, and you're reading from the images. But once again, it's not a cognitive process that you're pulling from your subconscious and your intuition. And the powerful messages that come from your subconscious during this process, it's really hard to explain. You kind of have to experience it. And
Yeah.
it's so powerful. So I say that it is a form of art therapy. I don't know if the pedagogy of art therapy would agree.
Yeah.
So in my experience when I was at Merrillhurst, I took a lot of my electives were in the art therapy program.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned there was that art therapists don't interpret anyone's art.
Mm-hmm.
They help the person to express their feelings, their pain, their experiences um, into art, and then help them to interpret its meaning
Mm-hmm.
by just encouraging things like you do, like we do in this soul collage experience,
Yeah.
where what does that mean to you,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And when I got so into the soul collage thing, so much so that I did the training and became a teacher for it, and then started utilizing it in the community. I had an opportunity in, I think it was 2012 or 13, to work at the Coffee Creek Women's Prison,
Wow.
and through their pastoral program, and teach 26, I think there were 26 women who were prisoners there, how to do soul collage. And
Wow.
that was such a powerful experience. I
I
can't
bet
even
that
tell you.
brought so much like healing. I can't even imagine.
Well, it was helpful. It was helpful to all of the women. It felt really empowering to be helping um, others in that way, but it was more powerful than me to me,
Yeah.
in my own healing, not only because it gave me some confidence in my ability to teach this medium,
Hmm.
um, but I had grown up in my family of origin. Um, I describe myself often as the Marilyn of the Munsters.
Oh
Because
yeah.
I'm like the only normal one in my family, whatever normal is, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but my mother, my father, and my brother have all spent time in prison.
Hmm.
And that is someplace I never wanted to go. And I have
Yeah.
really icky feelings
Wow.
around it. And so even walking into that prison and
Wow.
having the big doors slam behind me, even though I had the badge and the approval that I could leave at
Yeah.
any time, it was still um, a very powerful experience, overcoming my own fear.
Yeah.
And
And in it, you're allowing like that's just like wow.
yeah, it was huge. I'll admit, I had to, the first time we went, because you had to go before the event. Um, I had to go, or the events, because we did it a few times, but um, the before you went the first time, you had to go there and get your security clearance, and they gave a tour of the facility and whatever. So you're not just walking in cold. I had to take a Xanax. I was so, I could barely leave the parking lot. I'm not
Oh
even
yeah.
joking. It was really
Trauma, the thing,
powerful.
yeah, the things that we've gone through in life, like the trauma that we can hold on to, like that's
Yeah.
why like I am I can totally empathize with that experience because I know there's things like that for me that it's like if I was to go into that situation thinking like I'm coming to offer a modality that may help other people heal, but it's in a space where I feel like is going to trigger me in a ton of ways. For me, that would
Yes.
be like the church. Like if because it is has been such a toxic place for me most of my life. And so I would compare it to that, but it it is incredible that you just walked in there and who cares that you had to take a Xanax? Like the fact that you fucking did it, like, and just all that came out of that, like that is an incredible story. Wow.
Well, I have to tell you, I can't give all the credit to the Xanax, because the friend at the time who was uh, the reason why I got this opportunity and everything, her name was also Holly. Uh,
Oh,
she really helped me through that experience. You know, she was at the time doing her doctorate in pastoral counseling,
oh yeah.
and but she's not in your regular path of pastoral counseling. She is a pagan
Oh,
counselor,
okay.
and so very different. But
Yeah.
also, like when you, so side note, when I was 9 years old, I asked my mother, my birth mother, I asked her why everyone in our family was a different religion. And she was like, I don't know. And we had just moved from LA to the Palm Springs area.
Yeah.
And she, the next day, I don't know if it was um, tied to my question or not, but she got me a bus pass. And I spent that entire summer going to all these different, uh, religious institutions, and places of spirituality and what have you. I like all of it. I went to the Sikhs, I went to the Jewish temple, I went to every denomination of Christianity, and the
Yeah.
Catholics and the Mormons and the everything. There were some places that wouldn't let me in because I was a child, unaccompanied, and I was female,
Oh yeah.
and all these things. It was really interesting to see all the rules and regulations of each place, but there were certain institutions that were very welcoming of my curiosity and my questions, and um, and just welcoming in other ways. And then other ones that were just terrifying. And my conclusion at the end of that summer, when you go back to school and you have to write what you did over the summer. So
Yeah.
I wrote this crazy paper, right?
Yeah.
I'm 9 years old, or I just turned 10.
Wow.
When I wrote the paper, and I spent my summer going to church, like all the different
kinds.
ways.
Yeah.
To figure out why there are so many. And I concluded that the Beatles got it right, and all you need is love. And that if you boil down all of those religious institutions, the
Comes
core
down
of
to that.
them,
Yeah. Yeah.
core of them are love. Not that not necessarily that in their ways of bringing that forward, they show up in that way.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think we can tell that with the Trump era that
Yes.
that did not.
Don't get me started.
Yeah.
But yes. So that is, I come from, I also like had so many experiences around religion and spirituality growing up, because I would just adopt whatever place I landed that my mother put me. I would adopt whatever, religious or whatever practices that family had.
Mhm.
And so I was a Methodist, I was a Catholic, I was a Baptist, I was
Whatever.
a Buddhist, I was Jewish. Like I did all these different things. I was an honorary Jew at a very young age, because
Wow.
most of my friends growing up in the desert were Jewish. And so I went to lots of bat mitzvahs, I can't even say the word, and got invited to seders and all this kind of stuff. So I found out, I'm sorry, I'm like sidetracking.
You're totally fine.
ADHD, hi.
Oh, no, totally fine.
But what the truth of that, my personal spiritual path, is that I realized that I had a personal relationship with whatever you want to call it. I call it creator, and the creative force, the light. I have my own personal relationship. I understand the need for the socialization or the support that churches and those kinds of institutions bring for some people, and the stability that they provide for some people. I think I personally, my opinion is they fall very short of, of doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But
100% agree with that.
Right. But I figured out really early on that I'm not a religious person. I'm a spiritual person on a spiritual path. And my philosophies align with Buddhism. So, and my understanding is, some sects of the world view Buddhism as a religion, but any true Buddhist will tell you we don't worship Buddha.
Oh yeah. My best friend growing up came from a Buddhist family. Her mom came from a Catholic family, and her dad came from a Buddhist family. And it wasn't like they worshiped Buddha. It was just that they recognized the things that he understood. It was basically like the Enlightenment or the philosophies and things that he learned about life. They took those on to learn about life as well. Like,
yes. And I have, embodied that, or tried to embody that path myself. Do I consider myself a perfect Buddhist? Absolutely not. I actually say I'm a lazy Buddhist, but I always try to show up in service and kindness and empathy and compassion. Those are like the way that I have chosen to live my life. I don't think that I'm better than anybody because of that, or anything like that. It's just the way that I feel okay living my life like that. It feels comfortable and it feels right to me.
Yes.
But
the spiritual side of health is so important, and I think that a lot of mainstream Western medicine, or whatever you want to call it, has kind of left that part out. But I really believe it is a huge part of I say I have a relationship with God. When people say, are you a Christian, I don't use that term because of what that term has become. I do have a strong relationship with Jesus, and I do believe in him. But I don't, it's a relationship, and out of that relationship comes a lifestyle based on having a relationship with him, which is compassion and love and empathy and like all of the above. And What was
Right.
that?
For everyone.
Yeah. Yes,
For
for
everyone.
everyone.
That's the thing that I think is missing in a lot of like Christian
Oh yeah, it's pick who you what.
lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, who gets it? Like you get to choose who gets your compassion and empathy. That's where I have a big
Yeah.
problem with
It
it.
messes
There's
with me so much because I feel like that is the complete, I don't feel like, I know that that is the complete opposite of what is actually, if you
yes,
understand scripture for what it really says, that is the absolute
yes,
opposite. It is
yes,
believing that you are just, the way you treat anyone is like treating Jesus like that. Like,
yes,
pretend that that person is Jesus no matter what,
yes.
even the murderer, even the person that does the sin that you think is the most abominable, whatever it is, like that's just like treating Jesus like that. And to even go above that, to think that you are above some person who, like, I think the biggest thing in therapy that a lot of people who don't do therapy don't recognize is you have the ability to be just as bad of a person as anybody. Like,
Yeah,
we all have that in us, and it's not saying you're better than somebody, it's facing that. Like, it's facing the fact that, hey, I'm capable of doing just as bad, and why? What are the things that have happened to me that, I need to work through, It's like, yeah, for
on
sure.
the journey to becoming a counselor too, you do so much introspection. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know how all counseling programs work, but the ones that I have been introduced to, they are all based in there's self-care and self-reflection.
Mhm.
And the first thing you really need to do is check your biases, right?
Yep.
And because that is so important. And when you're showing up in the seat of a counselor in that office with that client, you need to be non-judgmental. You
Oh yeah.
need to be unbiased.
Mhm.
And if you feel a bias coming up, then you need to check yourself and find out why that is and how it could, your bias, if not checked, could affect this person that is in
Mhm.
front of you that you're there to help.
Stay tuned for next episodes on www.resilienceresourcing.com.